Rain hit the ground like bullets. A man's screams tore through the night as muddy water swallowed a child's toys. Police flashlights flickered over the backyard, where a fresh mound of soil rose like a wound. Logan's hands were bleeding from digging with his bare fingers. Somewhere under that dirt was the only thing he ever loved. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. They said my boy went missing. That's what Fiona told the cops. But when I got to her sister's cabin deep in Arkansas woods, I already knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like the ground itself was hiding a secret nobody wanted to say out loud. The flashing red and blue lights painted the mud in colors of panic. Officers were talking near their vehicles, not searching. I rolled from my truck, dragged my half-working legs out of habit, every movement sharp with pain. The earth smelled wrong. Not like rain. Like something had died too recently. Fiona stood near her 5 sisters, Amelia, Brooke, Jocelyn, Lila, and Quinn. All of them dressed in black sweats, whispering. None of them looked at me. Fiona's eyes were red, but her hands didn't shake. She said Eli must have wandered behind the cabin into the creek. Creek's dry, I told her. She looked down. A police officer patted my shoulder and said, "We'll find him, sir." But his tone sounded like a lie already tired of being told. I followed the trail toward the backyard. That's when I saw it. The toy truck Eli carried everywhere, lying overturned in the mud. Its little wheels half buried like it had been pressed in intentionally. My heart started pulling air too fast. The kind of breath you take when your soul already knows the truth your mind's still fighting. No dogs barking. No searchlights aimed where they should be. Just silence. That dead kind that swallows noise. I didn't wait for permission. My hands hit the dirt. Cold, soaked, alive with worms. I started clawing like a man who'd lost his sanity. Every handful brought more panic instead of hope. The cops yelled to stop. I didn't. Something soft brushed my fingers. Fabric. I tore the dirt apart, pulled up a tiny backpack. Eli's. Covered in wet soil and something dark that wasn't just mud. My throat broke open, but no sound came out. I opened the bag out of blind desperation. Inside were his little shoes and a cracked tablet, the screen flickering with a cartoon frame frozen on it. A smiling kid with a balloon. I turned back toward them. Fiona was crying now, but her sisters stood still. All 5. Silent. Like statues. Like they were listening for a sound underground that only they could hear. A neighbor shouted something about calling forensics. I didn't move. Couldn't. The officer took the bag. His face shifted. Then he quickly whispered orders into his radio. I glanced around. The ground around the mound was uneven. 5 sets of distinct shovel marks fading near a pile of rotting wood. 5 sisters. 5 shovels. Rain started again, heavier this time. I looked at Fiona one more time. She stepped back into her sister's shadow. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. But I read it clear. It wasn't supposed to be you who found him. The dirt under my knees felt alive. Breathing. Hiding something too cruel for daylight. Police tape went up. They ordered everyone inside. But I stayed kneeling in that mud, feeling the cold spread up my body. Somewhere under that ground was my little boy, and behind me stood the people who put him there. And for the first time since the war, I felt that old soldier's silence come back. That kind that doesn't scream, it waits. The flashing lights didn't leave until dawn. By then, the rain had turned the entire property into a swamp, washing away footprints that I knew shouldn't have been there. The official report was an insult to my intelligence. The lead officer, a man who looked too young to be shaving let alone managing a crime scene, called it a tragic structural collapse. He claimed an old septic tank had given way, creating a sinkhole that Eli had stumbled into while playing hide-and-seek. He slipped, sir, the officer said, clicking his pen nervously. The ground just opened up. It happens in these parts after heavy storms. I stared at him. He didn't slip into a backpack, officer. Someone buried that bag. We believe he might have been trying to protect his things from the rain, he countered, avoiding my eyes. It's a coping mechanism for scared children. I looked past him toward the porch. Fiona sat there, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, holding a mug of tea that wasn't steaming anymore. Around her, the wall of sisters stood unbreakable. Amelia, the oldest, was whispering something into Fiona's ear, her hand resting aggressively on Fiona's shoulder. It didn't look like comfort, it looked like control. Brooke and Jocelyn were leaning against the railing, scrolling on their phones. Who scrolls on social media hours after their nephew is declared dead? Lila and Quinn were watching the police pack up, their faces blank, eyes tracking every piece of evidence bag being loaded into the van. They were too calm. That was the soldier in me talking, the part of my brain trained to spot ambushes. Grief is messy. It's loud. It makes people collapse. But this was coordinated silence. I tried to step onto the porch, my wheelchair digging into the soft gravel of the driveway before I locked the brakes and stood up on my crutches. The pain in my lower back flared, a reminder of the shrapnel that retired me, but I pushed through it. "Fiona," I called out. My voice sounded jagged, like broken glass. She looked up, her eyes wide, but before she could speak, a man in a gray suit stepped between us. I hadn't seen him arrive. He smelled like expensive cologne and stale tobacco. "Mr. Logan," the man said, holding up a hand. "I'm the family attorney. My clients are in a state of deep shock. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "Your clients?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "That's my son. I have a right to talk to his mother." "You have a right to wait for the autopsy report," the lawyer said smoothly. "Until then, you are trespassing on private property. The sisters have expressed concern for their safety given your military history and current emotional state." My grip tightened on the crutches until my knuckles turned white. They were playing the PTSD card. It was their favorite weapon. For years, Fiona's sisters had whispered that I was dangerous, that the army had broken me, that I wasn't fit to be a father because I didn't know how to switch off the violence. Now, they were using it to keep me away from the truth. "I'm not leaving until I see him," I said, my voice dropping to that low register that used to make privates sweat. "The coroner has already transported the body," Amelia said from the porch. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the morning mist. She didn't look sad. She looked annoyed. "Go home, Logan. You've done enough drama for one night." I looked at her shoes. They were pristine white sneakers. Not a speck of mud. If they had been searching for Eli like they claimed, running through the woods, panicking, their shoes would be destroyed. But they were clean. They hadn't searched, because they knew exactly where he was. I turned around, pretending to comply. I swung my body toward my truck, letting the engine roar to life. I drove down the long dirt driveway, watching them in the rearview mirror. As soon as I rounded the bend, out of sight, I killed the engine. I rolled down the window, letting the silence of the woods rush in. The wind carried sound well in this valley. I needed to hear what they said when they thought the threat was gone. I quietly opened the door and moved through the brush, keeping low, ignoring the agony in my legs. I positioned myself behind a stack of firewood near the side of the house. The lawyer was gone. The police were gone. "I told you he wouldn't buy the sinkhole story," a voice hissed. It was Quinn. "He doesn't have to buy it," Amelia's voice replied, calm and terrifying. "He just has to accept it. The autopsy will be clean. We handled that." "He saw the bag, Amelia." Fiona's voice trembled. "He saw the mud on the bag." "So what?" Amelia snapped. "It's just a bag. Stop crying, Fiona. You wanted this problem solved. We solved it." My blood ran cold. "Problem? My son was a problem?" "I didn't mean this," Fiona sobbed. "I just wanted full custody. I didn't want him." "Quiet," Amelia ordered. "It's done. We stick to the script. Logan is unstable. He's grieving. He's confused. That's the narrative." I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the damp wood, trying to record the sound of my own heart breaking. Then, I heard the whisper that would haunt me until the day I died. It was Brooke this time, her voice low, dripping with venom. "We just need to wait for the funeral. Once the dirt is over the box, Logan can dig all he wants." He'll never find what we really did to that boy. He wasn't supposed to find him so soon. We needed one more hour to finish it. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream rising in my throat. They hadn't just buried him. They were hiding something else. Something worse than death. The day of Eli's funeral looked like a photograph that lost all its color. The sun refused to show, and every breath of wind carried the smell of wet dirt. Rows of umbrellas covered people I didn't know, faces I didn't want to see. I sat under the oak tree at the edge of the cemetery, the only dry patch left. They'd placed a tiny casket into the ground, white, polished, and cruelly small. Fiona stood front and center, wrapped in black, her sisters behind her like a silent army. None of them looked at me. Not once. The priest's words floated past me like static, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But all I heard was we needed one more hour to finish it. That sentence had burned into my mind like acid. The police had closed the case, calling it a tragic accident after the coroner ruled the death as asphyxiation following soil collapse. No bruises, no defensive wounds, no fight. They labeled him a victim of circumstance. But I'd seen soldiers buried alive overseas. I knew the look of disrupted dirt and hands that didn't leave shovel marks out of panic, but precision. When the crowd started to leave, I stayed behind. I needed a moment alone with my boy. The sound of footsteps faded, and I heard the soft hum of engines pulling away. Then a hand touched my shoulder. I turned. It was an old woman, wrinkled face, raincoat, shaky smile. "You're Logan, right? The father?" I nodded. My throat was too tight to talk. "I live across from the cabin," she whispered, glancing toward Fiona's family huddled near their black SUV. "Been watching that place for years. I saw them that night. Heard the noise." "What noise?" I asked. She looked around again before pulling something small from her pocket. "Screaming," she said softly. "A child. Around midnight. Then a truck idling, and the sound of digging. I recorded some of it, but my camera's old." She pressed a small USB into my palm. "That boy didn't wander into the ground by mistake. Be careful who you trust." She walked off before I could speak again. My chest tightened with hope and rage all at once. That drive home felt longer than any mission I'd ever been on. Every red light, every drop of rain hitting the windshield felt like a countdown to something I didn't want confirmed but needed to see. At my house, I plugged the USB into my laptop. The file was shaky footage from a motion-activated security camera aimed at the woods behind the sisters' cabin. The date stamp, 2 nights before they called the police. At first, I saw nothing but rain. Then motion, a small figure, my son. Eli. He was alive, wearing his red jacket, holding a small flashlight. He walked toward the back fence, looking back like someone was calling his name. My heart started racing. He disappeared from the frame. For minutes pass. Then light flickers again, flashlights. 5 figures, all women, carrying something between them. Long, wrapped in a white sheet. They moved toward a dugout space behind the cabin. Rain hammering down, mud everywhere. One of them, the tallest, Amelia, I recognized her posture, is shouting at the others, but the audio's blown out. Then Brooke pours something dark from a gas can while Jocelyn holds a shovel. The footage cuts out after a blinding flash of light, maybe lightning. I froze the frame. 5 bodies. One small shape between them. My skin crawled. I replayed it again, zooming in until the pixels broke apart. Even through distortion, I saw something in Amelia's hand, not a shovel. It was a phone. She was taking pictures. Their arrogance was unreal. They didn't care about hiding it. They thought no one would ever see. I sat back, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My living room lights flickered. I hadn't realized how late it was or how quiet the world outside had gone. I reached for my notebook and started writing their names. Amelia, Brooke, Jocelyn, Lila, Quinn. One by one, I wrote them twice. The first line for the truth, the second for justice. But I didn't call the cops. I didn't send the footage to the detective. Men like me don't chase justice through paperwork. We plan. We watch. We wait for mistakes. That night, sleep didn't come. When I finally shut my eyes, I saw small, muddy hands pushing against heavy dirt, trying to breathe through a world that chose to bury him. At 3 a.m., I opened my notebook again and wrote one more thing under the list of names. Whatever they buried that night wasn't just my son. There's something else under that earth. Next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. A small brown envelope lay on my porch. No address. No return name. Inside, a single photograph. The 5 sisters standing behind a grave, Eli's grave. Their hands covered in soil. Smiling. And under it, written in marker, "We warned you not to dig." I didn't sleep for days after the photo showed up. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every knock of the wind against the windows made me reach for the flashlight I kept beside my bed. But fear wasn't new to me. It just felt different when it came from home instead of a battlefield. I drove out to the cabin again 2 nights later. The forest was quiet, thick with mist. Police tape still fluttered weakly around the property, but no guard was posted anymore. They thought it was over. They'd underestimated how far a broken father would go. The ground where they'd buried him looked disturbed again, newer footprints by the site. 5 sets of them. I crouched down, tracing one with my fingers. It was shallow, hurried. They'd been back recently. That meant they were hiding something else or afraid I'd already found it. I collected a small chunk of soil, sealed it in a bag, labeled it Sample 1, Eli's rest site. Back in the Army, we were taught that dirt never forgets. It holds stories in layers. Oil, metal, ash. I'd seen it tell the truth under fire. I wanted that kind of truth now. The next day, I found someone who could help. His name was Nathaniel, a former squadmate, now a detective working out of Little Rock. He owed me his life from an ambush back in Helmand Province, and the first thing he said after I told him about Eli was, "Send me everything." Quietly, he told me not to confront the sisters until we had proof. But I already knew patience was the better weapon. Revenge shouted loud, justice whispered. I'd learned that difference the hard way. So I waited, watched, listened. The first move was small. I planted tracking devices under the bumpers of each sister's car. Easy work for someone who used to rig drones with scrap wire and a prayer. At night, I sat in the dark, sipping black coffee, watching the dots pulse on my laptop map. One by one, they started disappearing into strange places, miles apart, same hour every Thursday night. When Nathaniel ran the registration on a property their signals kept landing at, it came back under an anonymous LLC owned by Amelia's ex-husband, a lawyer out of Memphis. A big empty lot near a rock quarry. "Logan," he said over the phone, voice uneasy. "Whatever's there, it's off the books completely. You sure you want me following this?" "I just need you to watch their hands," I told him. "Don't worry about mine." By the 4th week, I finally took the drive myself. The road wound downhill through pine trees until it opened up into the clearing. I stopped the truck far enough back not to be seen and used the rifle scope for distance sight. 5 cars. All there. Headlights off, engines faintly humming. The sisters stood in a circle, flashlights aimed at the ground. Even from that far, their movements looked rehearsed, coordinated. I zoomed in through the scope. Shovels. 5 of them, gleaming wet from rain. They weren't burying something this time. They were digging again. Fresh soil scattered everywhere. Piles forming into symmetrical mounds. The kind of holes you dig when you already know how deep it has to be. Something metal glinted near one of the piles. I tightened the focus. It looked like a small, sealed container being lowered in. They covered it up quickly, packed the soil like they were sealing a secret back under the earth. They left an hour later, driving off in silence like ghosts fading back into shadows. I waited another hour before I moved. The air smelled of iron and rot. My boots sank into mud as I approached those shallow graves. My lungs felt too tight, the night too endless. I dug only a few inches before hearing a hollow clank under my spade. The container, small, cold, half-rusted. Inside, beneath a layer of plastic wrap, were paper stacks bound with string, photographs, old letters, cash. And at the very top, a birth certificate. Eli's. Except the father's name wasn't mine. The ground tilted under me. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Then I saw it. Beneath that, an envelope addressed to Amelia Grant. I opened it, hands trembling. Inside, a single printed email chain between Fiona and a clinic. Words that burned holes through me. Testing confirmed biological relation inconsistent with stated father. Eli wasn't my blood. Every nightmare I'd ever fought turned to silence. The kind that sinks in deeper than grief. But as I stared at that paper under the moonlight, I realized something worse. The sisters hadn't done this out of greed. They'd done it out of fear. Whatever they'd buried wasn't just my boy's truth. It was theirs. A branch cracked behind me. I turned fast, aiming the flashlight. Nothing but trees. Still, I knew eyes were on me. That's when my phone buzzed, a message from Nathaniel. I found a match for your soil sample, Logan. It's not just backyard dirt. It's from a landfill they used to dump chemical waste decades ago. Be careful. That property's toxic in every meaning of the word. I closed the box, buried it again, wiped the mud off my hands, and looked up at the sky. Rain clouds closing in, same as that night. They thought I was broken. What they didn't understand was that broken soldiers don't die quietly. They wait for the right ground to open. The next morning, I drove 4 hours straight to the forensic lab Nathaniel had arranged in secret. He'd sent me the address by text only once, then deleted the message from his end. When I pulled into the small garage behind the rundown building, he was already waiting. Badge clipped backward, sleeves rolled, eyes tired. He didn't waste words. You were right, he said, handing me a sealed bag. Inside it was the soil I'd collected from Eli's grave, now labeled with red ink and evidence code. That dirt matches samples taken from the landfill they used for dumping illegal chemicals back in '94. The same plot your ex's sisters leased 2 months ago. So they've been digging not only graves, but graves filled with secrets that could ruin them permanently. Maybe what I found in that metal box wasn't just about bloodlines. Maybe it was about money. Nathaniel leaned against his desk, rubbing the ache from his temples. I shouldn't even be involved in this, man. There's talk the DA knows Amelia personally. If I move the file forward, it won't survive a day. Then don't move it yet, I said, staring at the soil samples under the ultraviolet light. Let them find peace in thinking it's buried for good. He studied me, the old soldier in his face showing. You got that look again, like you're setting up a mission. I didn't answer, because I was. After I left the lab, I drove to Fiona's house. She opened the door slower than she used to, like she already knew I wasn't there for forgiveness. Her eyes were puffy, nose red from crying, but not the kind of crying that comes from guilt. Hers came from something else, fear. She stepped aside. I know what you found, she whispered as I walked in. Amelia told me. Then tell me the rest, I said, keeping my voice calm. She paced, clutching her own arms. They didn't mean to hurt him. It was supposed to scare you. Amelia said she'd make it look like an accident, so the court would declare you unstable. If people thought you lost him through negligence, you'd never get custody. They were supposed to get him back from the spot before daylight, but something went wrong. The dirt collapsed. Her breath hitched. It happened too fast. I kept watching her while she spoke, searching her face for even a flicker of truth. And then she broke down, repeating, they planned everything, Logan. I didn't stop them. I thought it'd only be a scare. A scare. That word felt like fire on raw skin. You watched them dig, I said. And you just watched? She nodded through tears. She said he'd wake up after an hour. Just long enough to prove you were distracted. My hands went still. My heart didn't even try to race. It just sank. Deep. Cold. I turned for the door, but Fiona ran after me. Please, don't do what I know you're thinking. There are ways, lawyers, cameras. I stopped. Look back once. You already went through all the lawyers, Fiona. All they ever did was buy you sister's time. Outside, the wind started to howl, carrying the smell of rain again. The same type of rain that always seemed to follow my boy's ghost. That night, I returned to the plots where they'd been digging at the landfill. Each hole now looked freshly sealed, tighter, smoother. Their boots had been here again. I left something in their place. 5 shovels upright in a single line, each marked with a metal tag I engraved myself. Eli's soil. May it remember, I didn't need to do anything violent. Sometimes, the mind breaks smoother than bones ever could. I'd spent enough time studying their patterns to know fear would do most of the work for me. Over the following week, Amelia's firm was investigated for tax fraud after Nathaniel anonymously leaked one document from that metal box. Jocelyn lost her nursing license when surveillance footage from the hospital mysteriously appeared showing drug theft. Lila's business closed from sudden bankruptcy audits. Quinn received anonymous calls from Child Protective Services asking about her unreported foster arrangement. Revenge wasn't noise, it was strategy. They started turning on one another. I could hear it in the hysteria of their voicemail messages to Fiona, accusing, screaming, crying. The same voices that whispered the night my son disappeared were now begging to be saved from their own storm. Fiona came over once more, pleading at my doorstep. You don't have to destroy them, Logan. You can stop this. I looked at her the way you look at a stranger holding an old photograph of someone you used to love. You said they buried him to teach me a lesson, I answered slowly. Now it's their turn to learn what soil really teaches, silence. That night, Nathaniel called again, his tone sharper this time. I just got word they filed a restraining order against you. Said you've been threatening them. You need to be careful, man. I'm not touching them, I replied. They're just burying themselves. Silence hung between us for a long moment before Nathaniel sighed. That's not what worries me. You know what they did after the filing? What? Bought a new property yesterday under a fake LLC again. Remote. Same region as the old one. One witness says they hauled equipment there. Heavy diggers. It's like they're preparing another burial ground. Or covering one. I hung up, grabbed my coat, and loaded the old field camera into the truck. The road to the new site wound through swampy pines and fog so thick it felt alive. When the headlights washed over a sign half buried in mud, I stopped and stepped out. On it, faint letters under the grime said, Grant Farm, private land, no trespassers. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, because underneath that new layer of dirt, I already knew whose name the land used to belong to before the records were erased. Mine. The rain hadn't stopped since that drive. It felt like the sky itself had gone to war with me, steady, relentless, familiar. When I pulled into the broken gate marked Grant Farm, everything inside me said this was where the storm was meant to end. The soil was soft, churned recently. I stepped out, boots sinking slightly with every move. The air smelled like gasoline and wet pine needles, a blend that doesn't belong anywhere near peace. The old farmhouse stood crooked near the tree lean, its paint peeling, windows boarded. Someone had been using it as a storage spot. I pushed one of the boards aside and stepped in. Each wall was covered with papers, blueprints, property deeds, fake invoices. All of them linked back to Amelia and her sisters. But something else caught my eye, photographs of Eli. Not family photos, surveillance ones. Taken at parks, outside my old house, at school. Time-stamped. Dated. Logged. They had been watching him for months before he died. I sat there in the dust, holding the one photo where he was smiling faintly, sitting on a swing with his eyes closed against the wind. My hands shook, but not from grief this time, from something colder. Nathaniel's voice played in my head from years ago, back when we used to hunt high-value targets. Don't hit hard. Hit precise. Make them realize what they did before it's over. So I started planning. The next week moved like a quiet storm hidden under routine. I sent anonymous tips to the media about Amelia's fraud case, then leaked smaller stories connecting the sisters' properties to hazardous waste sites. It was enough to make reporters dig on their own. Within days, the sisters started turning on each other publicly, snapping, accusing, leaking private messages. Their calm, polished image cracked. While they fought, I was busy leaving reminders. Small things only they would notice. A framed photo of Eli appearing on Amelia's office desk. A shovel painted white and left on Quinn's porch. A tape recorder on Brooke's windshield playing a single sentence. He's waiting underground. I wasn't trying to scare them into running. I wanted them to look at the ground the way I had, afraid of what might crawl back out. Still, I kept my calm in public. When reporters came to me, I said nothing. When the police asked, I gave them rehearsed silence. And in between, every night, I returned to Grant Farm, watching the land breathe fog and secrets. There was something still there. I could feel it. Fiona showed up again one night, her car headlights washing across the field as I stood near a half-dug trench the sisters had left behind. She stepped out, umbrella trembling in rain, screaming over the wind, "Logan, please stop. You're making everything worse." I didn't answer at first. I just looked at her, the woman who'd stood there that night, and watched them do it. She inched closer, stepping through pooled water. "They're terrified, Logan. They haven't slept in days. They say you're showing up everywhere, leaving things. I cut her off. Like closure? Like reminders of what they buried. "They're my sisters," she cried. "And Eli was my son," I said quietly, even if the papers said otherwise. Her face froze. You saw that file?" "I saw everything," I whispered. "That boy carried my blood in ways no test can measure. You think genetics make a father? Try digging for your child with your bare hands in the dark. That's how you earn fatherhood." She broke down again, half sobbing, half breathless. "They didn't mean to kill him. The ground collapsed too fast. You don't have to do this." I walked past her toward the trench. The rain struck my coat in sheets, the mud swallowing my boots deeper every step. "I already did it," I said, my tone flat but calm. "What did you do?" she asked, voice trembling. "Buried something for each of them," I said without turning back. A truth, a fear, a reason to look over their shoulders. She reached out to grab my arm. "Logan, please," but headlights broke through the trees behind her. A black SUV slowed to a stop. The driver's door opened. Early light struck Amelia's face as she stepped out, eyes wide with disbelief. Behind her, the other sisters climbed out too, their faces pale under flashes of lightning. They weren't looking at me. They were staring past me, at the trench. Brooke whispered something I couldn't catch. Then I saw the panic spread between them. Lila backed up slowly. "What did you bury here?" Amelia asked, her voice shaking. "I didn't move. I buried what you were afraid to dig up." The rumble of thunder made her flinch. The wind picked up again. That's when I noticed the faint metallic scent rising from the soil, gasoline. Amelia's eyes darted everywhere. You didn't." I met her stare. "You already did." Their headlights flickered. One of the engines began to sputter. Lila shouted to get back in the car, but none of them did. They were frozen in that storm, staring at the earth they'd turned into a weapon. That night, I didn't leave. I watched their cars pull away, quiet and fast, their tires slipping through the mud. Fiona stayed behind, her umbrella blown into the ditch, her body trembling as she whispered, "They'll come for you next." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I looked down at the trench once more, the rain filling it until it looked like a dark mirror reflecting every terrible thing hidden beneath. By morning, the news broke that the sisters had gone into hiding. Their lawyer withdrew from the case. Amelia's firm shut down, but the line had already been drawn. They knew whom the storm belonged to now. The following nights came without sleep. Every gust of wind against the windows felt like a whisper trying to drag me back to that field. The headlines followed me everywhere now. 5 sisters vanish after courthouse collapse. Every photo of them smiling sickened me. They were running, hiding, desperate to bury something deeper than guilt. Nathaniel tried calling again, but I didn't pick up. There was nothing the law could do for me anymore. Not when the people who'd ruined everything moved like shadows through the cracks of legal systems they controlled. Amelia had money. Brooke had connections. Jocelyn had favors owed in hospitals. Lila and Quinn? They had silence, the kind that kills truth faster than any bullet. Then one morning, on my porch, a package appeared. No address, no sender. Inside was a plain cell phone and a note. Only one line. Come alone. We finished this where it started. A GPS coordinate flashed on the screen when I turned it on. The location sat 15 miles deep through forestry roads, close to the quarry where I saw those 5 shovels weeks earlier. I loaded the truck, the same equipment I used in war: flashlight, spare batteries, folder of photos, my son's toy truck. Not for confrontation, but remembrance. Soldiers don't forget why they march. By evening, I was there. The twilight haze painted everything gray and ruined. The sound of flies echoed over the pits, that same soft hum I'll always associate with death. Their cars were already parked in a half circle, engines off, doors open. I could smell fear even before I saw movement. Amelia stepped forward first, her hair soaked with sweat and rain. You wanted to find us? Then dig. You need to hear it from us. Behind her, Brooke and Jocelyn held something heavy, rolled tarps, not moving. Lila was shaking so badly, she couldn't even light her cigarette. Quinn just stared at me, with eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. What did you do? I asked, voice quiet enough to cut through the thunder building above us. Amelia laughed once, sharp, broken. We didn't just bury your kid, Logan. We buried the man that should have been his real father. The one Fiona was seeing behind your back. That's what your precious Grant farm used to cover up. It wasn't a waste site. It was a graveyard made to disappear mistakes. Her words slammed through me like mortar fire. You killed him too? We had to, she screamed, stepping closer, tears blurring her eyes. He threatened to expose Fiona. He wanted money. Amelia said she'd take care of it, and she did. But that night, Eli saw too much. He followed us from the truck. We tried to send him back, but she broke down into sobs. The ground gave way too quick. It wasn't meant to happen that way. Brooke dropped the tarp. The shape inside rolled out, bones wrapped in half-decayed fabric, the remains of the man Amelia had buried long before. Fiona's lover. The other sisters started crying. Even the thunder felt smaller beside that sound. So that's your truth, I said, staring down at what they'd unearthed. You hide one body, and up digging two. Karma doesn't stay buried. It always smells its way out. Jocelyn fell to her knees, clutching the mud. We didn't mean for Eli to die. We just wanted our sister's life back. The plan was never meant for blood. Lightning ripped across the sky, and the rain came harder. I could barely see their faces now through the blur of it. Only their shapes kneeling around the graves they made. Amelia suddenly pulled something from her coat, a handgun, shaking in her grip. If you tell anyone, we go down forever. I'll end this right here. I didn't move. I stepped closer into the flash of lightning. I wanted her to see my face clearly, the calm that only comes when a man's already lost everything. You've already ended it, I said. I'm just here to watch the ground finish what it started. A sudden noise cracked behind us, tires crunching gravel. Red and blue lights shattered the darkness. Nathaniel's voice roared through a megaphone. Drop the weapon. Hands where I can see them. Amelia spun toward the light, panicking, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot rang out. A single deafening sound swallowed by thunder immediately after. When my eyes refocused, Amelia was on the ground, gun fallen inches from her hand. The others screamed, scattering toward the cars, but the mud caught their legs like living hands. Nathaniel's team rushed down the slope, wrestled the sisters into cuffs. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching them cry, watching them sink deeper into the drenched soil that had betrayed them at last. Nathaniel came up beside me, panting hard. They confessed, Logan. We got it all on recording. Everything. You okay? I looked down at the spot where Amelia fell. Her blood had mixed with black mud, the same type I'd dug through for Eli. No, I whispered, but the ground finally is. When the sirens faded and the officers led them away, I stayed behind. The flashlight beam swept across something glinting near the edge of the pit, a small metal tag stuck in the muck. I picked it up. Eli's soil. May it remember. The heavens cracked above me. rain washing over my face like baptism, and for the first time since that night, I didn't feel like drowning. But deep down, I knew the sisters' story wasn't done yet. The courts would twist their guilt, the law would bend for money, and what the earth couldn't keep hidden, people could. I had one last thing to do before any of it ended. The night Amelia died, the world stood still, but the noise inside me wouldn't stop. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest and made every heartbeat sound like thunder. The police took the sisters into custody, but even as they were driven away, I knew this wasn't justice, not the kind that heals anything. It was a temporary cage built on fragile words. Men like me had seen this dance before, money changing hands, records disappearing, truth being rewritten until no one remembered what was real anymore. Nathaniel dropped me off at my house at dawn. Neither of us talked. He stood by the truck for a moment, the sky slowly catching color behind the rooftops, and said quietly, "Let them face the system now, Logan. You've done enough. But enough doesn't exist for fathers like me. Not when you've spent nights staring at the spot where your son's laughter used to echo and hearing nothing but wind." I just nodded so he'd stop staring through me like I was fading out. For days, I pretended to rest. I fixed the fence, cleaned the porch, watched the same local news loop that ran Amelia's death over and over, calling it self-defense gone wrong. They painted me as the broken ex-ranger fueled by grief, a ticking clock. The surviving sisters kept their silence, their lawyers spinning stories about trauma and accidents. But one night, a new headline appeared. All charges dropped. Insufficient evidence. I expected rage. Instead, I felt something heavier. Stillness, the kind that settles in when you realize fate isn't punishing those who deserve it. I shut the TV off, stepped outside, and sat on the porch. The rain started again, soft drizzles cutting through the glow of the streetlight. I watched it fall, remembering Eli's face when we'd sit on this same porch, counting raindrops racing down glass. He always bet on the slowest drop winning. That memory stayed with me for hours until the dawn light came crawling over the empty horizon. And with it, something inside me moved. They'd taken everything: family, trust, peace. But they hadn't taken my patience. 2 weeks later, the sisters were let out quietly, escorted at night through a different gate to avoid cameras. They assumed disappearing from the world would end it. What they didn't know was Nathaniel still owed me one last favor: access. Through a secure server, he sent me their probation files, new locations, new names. The government could hide faces, but not tracks. Every GPS ping, every pattern. It all led me back to the same region they always escaped to, the valley where their crimes had begun. Grant Farm. When I got there, the field was different. Police floodlights and caution tape were gone. The ground looked level again, almost peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But soil keeps memory better than people. I could feel Eli in the air here, soft, distant, warm for the first time. I stood there for a long time until I noticed something just beyond the old barn. The earth was bulging again, uneven, fresh. Someone had been digging recently. I took a step forward, then another. My boots sank deep with a sick, sucking sound. Kneeling down, I brushed the topsoil away and froze. Beneath the mud was wood, plank edges, rough and new. A crate. I dug slowly, carefully pulling the edges free. Inside were documents, recordings, photos, seals, everything the sisters thought they had destroyed. Every hidden transaction, every piece of blackmail that kept their power alive. And at the very top of that box was something small and wrapped in cloth. When I opened it, I almost stopped breathing. Eli's bracelet, blue beads, and one single cracked charm that said "Dad's brave boy." My throat closed. For the first time in years, I felt tears, not rage, not frustration, but grief raw enough to make me sink down on my knees. I hadn't cried at the funeral. I hadn't cried when they confessed. But there, surrounded by the ghosts of what they'd buried, I finally did. When the sobs quieted, I breathed deep and started planning again. I didn't need weapons anymore. I had what mattered most, truth. So I spent the next few nights on the move. Every piece of paper, every photograph went into digital folders, encrypted, copied, and sent to journalists, judges, and lawyers with one condition: release it all if I disappear. I wasn't after violence anymore. I wanted exposure. The kind that ends people long before bullets do. Then, as if fate itself wanted to join, storms returned across the valley, washing away truck tracks, ruining fresh construction where new owners were trying to rebuild the land. The papers called it soil instability. I called it karma remembering its place. 3 days later, I got a call from Nathaniel. His tone was different now, shaken, lower. "They're dead," he said flatly. "I know," I said, though I didn't. He explained, local officers found the sisters' SUV at the quarry. All 5 of them, trapped inside. The ground had collapsed beneath the old road after endless rain. The car sank into the pit. There were no signs of foul play, just the weight of earth closing over what it had claimed years before. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Nathaniel said, "That land doesn't forgive, does it?" "No," I answered. "It returns things to balance." That night, I went back one last time. The rain came down harder than before, flattening everything into rippling sheets of mud. I walked to the same spot where Eli's toy truck used to sit, where the mound first betrayed the lie. My flashlight flickered once, caught on something shiny resting above the sinkhole, the handle of a shovel. One of theirs, rusted now, bent from the weight of soil and time. I picked it up and stood it upright in the center of the field until the rain began filling my footprints. The lightning flashed behind me, painting the world in white for a single perfect frame. For a split second, the empty field looked exactly as it had the night he vanished. I knelt, pressing my hand against the wet dirt. "You can rest now," I whispered. "They're with you." Wind tore through the trees, faint, almost like a sigh. The last shovel leaned with the breeze and then sank softly into the earth, vanishing inch by inch until it was part of the ground again. When I turned back toward the truck, I caught a glint through the rain. A figure standing near the trees, Fiona. She looked smaller now, drained, holding her coat around herself like armor. She took a hesitant step forward. "Is it over?" she asked, voice barely above the rain. I watched her eyes, red and sleepless. Maybe once I would have hated her, blamed her for everything. But I realized the earth had already done enough blaming for both of us. "It's over," I said. "The ground finished what we couldn't." She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "I never meant for this." "I know," I replied, stepping past her. "You buried guilt long before I started digging." I left her standing there as the thunder swallowed our words. By morning, the news had spread again. 5 sisters found dead in what authorities called a tragic geological accident. The world labeled it another mystery. I didn't correct them. Some stories aren't meant for explanations. Some are meant for peace. I packed up the last of my things that week. Eli's pictures, a couple of medals, one folded flag. Before leaving town, I stopped by the cemetery. The mud around his grave was calmer now, grass finally pushing through again. Someone had left new flowers, a bunch of wild daisies tied with a ribbon. No names, no cards. I placed his bracelet next to them. The cracked blue beads glistened under weak sunlight. "You were brave, Eli," I said, voice steady but soft. "And you won." When I turned to leave, I saw Nathaniel leaning against his car near the road. "Heading out?" he asked quietly. "Going west," I said. "Somewhere the ground's not still talking." He placed a small box on the hood of my truck. Inside was a folded copy of the accident report from the quarry. At the bottom, his handwriting in pencil, "Justice finds its own shovel." I looked at him, half smiling. "Keep your badge clean this time." He nodded. "You keep your soul, Ranger." The drive out of that valley felt different. The road curved past the same pines that once hid horror, but now they stood quiet, washed clean. No sirens, no graves, just the steady beat of tires on wet asphalt. Somewhere behind me, I could feel the story closing itself. And maybe, for once, I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance. Because sometimes the most honest kind of revenge isn't fire or blood. It's peace. The kind that makes your enemies fade from memory, buried the way they once buried truth. As the rain finally broke into sunlight, I looked into the mirror one last time and said aloud to the empty seat beside me, the seat that had belonged to a boy who loved rain races and slow raindrops. "We're done, kid. They can rest now." The wind whispered through the cracked window, soft and forgiving. For the first time in years, I allowed myself a small smile and kept driving west, leaving every ghost behind where it belonged, in the soil that never forgot. It didn't take long for the story to catch fire again. Reporters called it the Sisters' Curse, 5 women dead on the same land tied to an old, buried case. They didn't know half of it. They never would. The state called a review of Amelia's firm, reopened fragments of the case, and suddenly everyone wanted the grieving ranger back for comment. I stayed quiet. Let the headlines fight among themselves. Let gossip feed on questions. Truth didn't need me to speak anymore. It was already echoing through every courtroom hallway that once refused to listen. Still, when the subpoena arrived, hand-delivered by Nathaniel himself, I knew it was time to go back. The state wanted an official statement. The lawyers needed me to confirm details from the investigation, the supposed confessions. They didn't understand I didn't care about their paperwork version of justice, but I owed Nathaniel enough to show up. The courthouse stood like a monument to everything that fails quietly. Its marble floors didn't echo, they swallowed footsteps whole. The trial attracted a crowd, reporters, spectators, even strangers holding candles outside, as if tragedy could turn holy through attention. Inside, the air reeked of cheap perfume and fake guilt. They had Amelia's surviving sisters represented by a shiny new attorney team. Polished suits, hollow eyes. One of them, Brooke, was alive, not in this world, but in paperwork. Her death certificate was still under investigation. Her body hadn't been officially identified among those found. It took one glance at the defense table to realize the truth. She was sitting there, disguised under layers of bandages and bitterness, claiming to be one of the others, Lila. Pity wrapped in lies. The judge entered, gray-haired and tired of the performance that justice had become. "Let's proceed," he said, voice dry enough to scrape dust off truth. I was called first. The oath they made me take was useless. A man like me doesn't need promises. His scars do the remembering. The prosecutor's tone was careful but pressed for drama. "Mr. Logan, please describe your relationship with the deceased." "My son was one of their victims," I said simply. The room shifted. 100 pens started moving. The questions kept coming. Time, place, motive, the details of human cruelty folded into legal phrasing. Each answer dragged me deeper into the same pit I had been crawling out of for years. But I stayed calm, neutral on the outside. Inside, it was a storm I'd learned to control. When the defense had their turn, the lead lawyer adjusted his glasses and smiled thinly. "Mr. Logan, you admit you were present at the site the night Amelia Grant was shot?" "I was," I answered. "You also led the officers there?" I followed a message. "Someone else led me there." "And you said her death was an accident?" "Yes." He leaned forward, pretending sympathy. "Seems convenient, doesn't it? 5 sisters dead, one after another, and you, the father of the child at the core of it, walk away untouched. That doesn't strike you as unusual?" The gallery murmured. I didn't blink. It strikes me as the ground correcting what the law never did. The judge rapped his gavel once. "Answer within boundaries, Mr. Logan." "Boundaries," I murmured. "Those kept my son buried longer than he should have been." The defense sat down, face red, realizing pressing further would only feed my silence more meaning than any outburst ever could. Nathaniel testified next. He wore his uniform again, sharper this time, every button gleaming. His voice was measured, steady, habit-born. He explained the evidence logs, the recordings, the chemical landfill connection, every thread that tied the sisters to years of buried crimes. He didn't mention the favors he bent to return the case to light. He didn't have to. Truth showed in the weight on his face. For the first time, I saw something in the jury's eyes that courts rarely hold anymore. Disgust, not just at the horror of what happened, but at how neatly it had been hidden. When my turn ended, I walked out before cross-examination resumed. The noise of the courtroom bled into faint, muffled echoes behind the door. Outside, the sky hung low, gray as powdered ash. Reporters swarmed. Cameras lit up like gunfire flashes. One woman shoved a mic toward me. "Mr. Logan, do you believe in divine justice? Was this punishment?" I kept walking, then paused long enough to answer without turning. "Divine would have saved my boy." Nathaniel caught up moments later. We stood near the courthouse steps, the wind tugging at our coats, both of us staring down the street where rain gathered along the curb like mirrors. "They're going to rule it accidental deaths," he said. "Natural disaster. Landslide caused by unstable soil. No charges, no convictions." "I know." He looked at me sideways. "And you're fine with that?" "No," I said. "But sometimes silence says more than a verdict." That night, I drove out past the edge of town, toward the motel where I'd been staying since all of this began. The TV still ran replays of the trial coverage. Every anchor made it sound like closure. Every image of that courthouse gave the illusion of peace. But the truth wasn't in their scripts. It was outside, where the world still smelled of rain and loss. I pulled out one of Eli's drawings from my wallet. Crayon streaks of blue and red, stick figures under a giant sun. Me and Dad, rain winners. His letters still backward, his laugh still echoing between them somehow. The wind outside howled against the windows. For a moment, I could have sworn I heard his voice there too. Maybe memory just plays kindness for those who lost too much. When dawn came, an envelope slid under my door. Inside, a court document, and signed. An alert. Case dismissed. Classified under public safety anomaly. File closed. I folded the paper once, set it into the bathroom sink, and lit a match. The flame burned clean. No smoke. No smell. Just a tiny circle of orange devouring everything the world called justice. Nathaniel called a few hours later. His voice was quiet again, but there was a hint of relief. "You're officially free, Logan. It's over." For the first time, I believed him. But over felt more like a word people use when they don't know how to say there's nothing left to lose. That evening I drove again. Habit, therapy, punishment, maybe all three. The highway turned crimson under sunset. And in the reflection of the side mirror, for one slow heartbeat, I thought I saw a small shape in the seat behind me. Curly hair, tiny hands resting where his toy truck used to be. I didn't turn around. Didn't need to. I let the road stretch beyond the horizon, endless and unfamiliar. Because some ghosts don't haunt, they guide. And that's how Eli felt in that moment. Not gone, just lighter. I reached the ridge where the valley bent back toward Grant Farm and stopped the truck. The horizon carried that familiar storm gray tint again. Maybe the land would always remember me. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's hell. Either way, I whispered into the wind, "We keep driving, kid. No grave big enough to stop that." The raindrops started again, slow, patient, like the ones Eli always bet on. The trial had left me hollow, but not empty. Hollow means space to breathe again. The quiet after storms isn't peace, it's paralysis. For days, I stayed near the motel window, coffee cooling untouched, watching a world that drove on like nothing ever happened. People passed by, carrying laughter I couldn't feel. That's when I realized the story between me and that family wasn't finished. Their deaths hadn't been punishment. It was history resetting itself, but legacy still needed closing. A letter arrived 2 nights later with no return address. Inside, one line typed in red ink. "If justice doesn't dig deep enough, keep digging." The paper smelled faintly of wet soil. That night, I dreamed of shovels again. Not metal scraping rock, but dozens of them lined neatly along Eli's grave, glinting under moonlight like teeth waiting to bite. Some nights grief is gentle. It lets you cry. Other nights it builds dimensions, giving you instructions and pictures. Come morning, I drove back to Grant Farm. No more gates, no more tape. Just wide open land, unclaimed, breathing through the fog. I parked near the same grove where he'd once played with that toy truck. The air felt thick enough to hum. I stepped into the silence until the grass turned into soft mud and stopped at the base of 5 markers I'd put months before. The shovels stood crooked, rusting, but still holding steady, guardians of consequence. They looked untouched, but the earth around them had shifted again, flattened recently. Somebody had been here. I circled slow, spotting tire tracks along the ridge. 2 vehicles. Heavy. Nathaniel texted an hour later. Storm coming. Stay out of that valley. It's sinking. He didn't know I was already standing in the middle of it. And I wasn't leaving. I saw something glinting at the second shovel, the one with Amelia's name scratched faintly into the handle. I crouched. A piece of wire poked out from beneath the dirt, the end corroded but leading deeper into the ground like a vein through the skin of earth. I followed it with careful hands, tracing it 10 feet until it disappeared under a mound shaped like a shallow grave. There, half buried in wet clay, lay a metal case the size of a briefcase, newer, polished. Inside it, an envelope marked just one word, redemption. My pulse slowed. Inside were photographs, recent, printed in haste. Fiona's handwriting on the back of each one. It was her all along, returning at night to lay things straight. Photos of courtroom documents, police reports, anonymous donations under my son's name. Fiona was cleaning the mess her sisters left behind, quietly, not for them, but for me. Maybe guilt's final form is love we no longer deserve. I drove to her new house, a small gray place at the edge of town. She opened the door before I even knocked, as if she'd been waiting. Her hair was shorter now, streaked white. The moment our eyes met, all the anger I'd carried cracked somewhere deep. I've been making it right, she said softly. They took everything from you. I couldn't let them take the truth too. You could have told me. She nodded, tears streaking through dust on her face. You would have turned it into war. I needed it to end quiet. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I handed her the case. I found what you buried. Her lips trembled, but she smiled weakly. Then maybe the ground's finally full, Logan. We sat by her porch in silence. Sometimes the absence of hatred feels heavier than hate itself. When evening fell, thunder rolled again across the horizon. The sky looked ready to break open. Fiona touched my arm gently. You should go, before the road floods. But I stayed. Something in me had finished battling the night. I wanted to see the storm that started this story wash over the same land one final time. By midnight, water cascaded through the fields. Mud slid down the ridge like slow-moving lava, swallowing fence posts, rocks, everything. From where I stood, it looked like the valley exhaled centuries of buried sins all at once. When lightning struck the ridge, the sound was a cannon cracking heaven. The shovels, one by one, leaned forward and disappeared into a whirlpool of sinking earth, gone without a trace. The land reclaimed its proof. By morning, the farm was gone. Every artifact, every marker erased. What remained was just a plain, soaked field under clean light. I drove back into town, drenched, clothes smelling of iron and ash. Nathaniel found me at the diner off Highway 19, watching rain slide down fogged glass. You went back, didn't you? He asked. The land buried itself, I said quietly. I just watched. He studied me for a while, then placed something on the counter, a folded piece of paper stamped by the state. You might want to see this. Probate court ruling came this morning. Fiona transferred all her remaining property, including Grant Farm, under your name. I stared at the paper, unread for a long time. Then I folded it again and tucked it into my jacket. Let it stay empty, I said. That place has done its job. Nathaniel sighed. You could sell it. Move on. No, I said. Some soil needs to rest with everything still underneath. When I left town the next week, I didn't look back. The trucks carried my few belongings, old photos, Eli's bracelet tied around my mirror. I drove west until the air smelled different, dry, lighter, without memory. I bought a small house by a canyon that looked out toward miles of open horizon. No graves, no rain. Each night, I walked out to the edge of the cliffs and listened. Wind made the canyon sing, a soft, endless low hum that reminded me of Eli's laughter chasing echoes down hallways. Sometimes, I swear I still hear him. In rustling leaves, in the patter of distant rain carried through air so thin it feels otherworldly. Maybe that's what healing truly sounds like. Not peace, but echoes learning to fade kindly. I planted no garden, built no fence. Just let the earth keep breathing under me, unowned, unstructured, clean. People think revenge is an explosion, a final act. But it's not. It's quiet. It's the shovel you choose to put down first. Eli taught me that. And by the time the next storm season rolled in, I knew. If the ground ever whispered again, it wouldn't be anger this time. It would just be the sound of love finally unburied. The valley was gone now, washed smooth by rain and time. The same land that once swallowed secrets had turned quiet again, flat, colorless, and innocent, as if it wanted no memory of what happened there. It looked almost peaceful, but peace isn't the absence of ghosts. It's learning to walk beside them without fear. Months had passed since Fiona's transfer, and I never went back. I'd settled in a small house north of Arizona, where the desert sighed through the wind instead of screaming like the storms back home. Every night, the stars glittered across the sky like thousands of eyes too far to judge. The kind of distance that makes life look survivable again. One evening, while sorting through the last of my boxes, I found Eli's toy truck, rusted, one wheel missing, still carrying dried bits of soil from that final day. Somehow, the weight of it still fit perfectly in my palm. I set it on the windowsill, letting the orange dusk hit it just right until it gleamed like a medal. I don't visit graves anymore. I've learned that grief doesn't stay in one place. It travels, finds new corners inside you, reshaping the way you live. Sometimes I think Eli's laughter became part of the wind itself. Every time I hear a sudden gust chasing dust across the ground, I look up, half expecting to see him running along it. Fiona called recently. Her voice was softer, smaller. She said she was moving, leaving everything behind. We were all poisoned by that land, she admitted. But you were the only one who grew from it instead of sinking. I told her I didn't grow. I survived, and survival isn't nobility, it's stubbornness disguised as grace. But after we hung up, I realized she was right about one thing. The ground doesn't kill. It mirrors what's already buried inside us. When the first desert rain finally came, I stood outside, letting it hit my face the way Eli used to when he'd tilt his head and giggle at thunder. I whispered his name once, half afraid the air would answer. It didn't, but I did feel warmth cutting through that rain, like the world itself was saying enough now. That night, I wrote something in my notebook. Not a plan, not evidence, not revenge. Just a letter. Eli, you don't have to wait for me anymore. The story's over. The bad men are gone. The ground is quiet. Wherever you are, let the rain fall, and race those drops like you used to. Slow always wins, remember. When I closed the notebook, a calm I'd never known before filled my chest. The story that began in mud had ended in sunlight. That was enough. And maybe that's what forgiveness really is, continuing when no one deserves it but you. So tell me, friends, when justice comes too late, does it still heal you? Or does it just make the silence louder? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Share your city or country down in the comments. It always amazes me how far these stories travel, finding people who feel like family, even through screens. If this story touched you, if it made you pause or feel even a little closer to something real, leave a like, subscribe, and keep that notification bell on. Not because of algorithms, but because next time, I'll bring you another thriller of betrayal, revenge, and redemption that'll stay under your skin long after it ends. Until then, Take care of yourselves, keep your hearts steady, and remember, every storm passes, but the ground never forgets. What kind of stories do you love hearing most? Emotional revenge, family betrayal, or quiet redemption? Tell me down below. I'll create the next story just for you.